Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today I want to talk about a topic that is inspired by a video from John over at KG Tropicals. And that video is going to be up in the corner, but the basics of it were, there's a big focus on filtration, but the main thing was, if somebody ever tells you, no, you're wrong, the only way to do it is this, then do not listen to them. And I fully agree with that sentiment, but I feel like one thing is left out of this conversation, and that's maybe the positive side, which is to say that in some of the cases, advice from anyone you listen to on the internet, dummies like me, whether it is John from KG Tropicals, whoever it may be, there might be something that we're missing as to how to actually have success. So let me dive into this a little. John was talking about some issue, and I think it spawns from something that's happened between a couple of YouTubers. I'm not really fully sure on the entirety, but I listened to the whole video, and I appreciated his message, which was that if somebody tells you there is only one way to do something, run away from them, right? In the sense that that's not good advice. And in many working industries, my industry especially, there's kind of an old adage of there's 11 ways to solve a problem. And I'm sure most of you know some variation of that sentiment, right? There's never only one solution in most things that are complicated. Keeping fish is one of them. It's not like the only way to keep a freshwater planted tank is on aqua soil with live plants and only these fish, right? There's a myriad of ways that we can put water in a glass box and keep fish successfully. There's thousands of different variables easily, probably millions, but there's not a singular way to find success. And the thing that I wanted to add to this conversation is, even for those who do find success, me with, say, Java Fern, right? I've had a number of people who contact me that struggle to keep Java Fern well, where I kind of just put it in my water and let it do its thing, and I have a lot of success with it. But that is one of the key parts I want to talk about. Water. Everyone's water is different and unique. So often, some advice that people might give you, a great example is a lot of us up in the Northwest, we have almost no KH or GH in our water, so we'll very frequently need to buffer our water. Well, if you live somewhere where there is naturally occurring mineral content in your general hardness, especially in your carbon hardness, you might not need to do that step. So us saying that, like, oh, you have to put crushed coral in every tank might not actually be correct for you. Right? So sometimes I think it's important that we look at the other side of that argument and go that just because a person is giving us advice on how to do something successfully, especially if they will mention very openly, hey, here's why I do this, it might not apply to you. Or maybe something that works really well for you just can't work for me because of the way that my water is. Another example of that is, for the most part, we think that guppies like hard water, right? It's kind of a common thing where almost all live bearers like that nice hard water, that higher mineral content. It does very well for them. But there are some fish that do better in softer water. My blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies are kind of an example. They actually don't really do all that well in super hard water, but if you get them in more like what is about GH 4 to 6 range, so about 120 TDS or so, if you're looking at your general hardness, and not a really super high carbon hardness, although that really doesn't matter as much as the general hardness, they do better. They do better in softer water. Not super soft. We're not talking about like Ultimate Angel black water looks like your tea, right? We're not talking about that stuff, but they tend to have more success in softer water that isn't quite as mineral rich. So there's another kind of example of why I'm saying that sometimes really good advice, let's say that we go to somebody that is a true expert in a lot of these things, and they will give you generalizations. Well, generalizations don't always apply to every single fish in a category. A small example here, Gary Lang recently visited the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, and he talked about a lot of rainbow fish. And for the most part, we know that rainbows like a little bit of mineral content in their water, but a lot of them come from streams or lakes that might not necessarily have high pH. They might be slightly softer water, but still have some mineral content, so it's not super soft water. Well, there's an exclusion to that in some of the... there's a particular fish that comes from a very tannic black water system where you really can't see through that water all that well. This fish basically has to be in very soft, low pH water, or it won't breed. And that's for those that are interested, that's the Cali Jacora. It's a beautiful fish. I'll put up a picture here from Gary Lang, but it's an incredible fish. It's very, very beautiful, but it doesn't do well in the same kind of water that I keep a lot of my rainbows in. It has to be in a very specialized setup. So sometimes that general information, it's a rainbow fish. It's going to do pretty well in my rock hard well water, because a lot of rainbows do. Rainbows can live in African cichlid level water very frequently. Some people will keep African cichlids and rainbows together. It's kind of incredible. But certain fish don't fit that mold. And I think the important thing is for us as aquarists, in these situations, anytime anyone says, this is how you have to do it, is go look at other sources of information and validate that it's not one of the exceptions to the rule. There's a lot of our fish, especially, can live in very flexible water parameters. They prefer certain stuff. And I'll give you a great example. Dojo Loaches, these big thick noodles behind me, right? Their thicknesses over here. They do well in typically cooler water. Somewhere between 68 and 72 Fahrenheit is a really good target for this fish. But they can survive and do well in a tank upwards of about 80 degrees. I purposely brought the temperature down in this tank a couple of degrees. It used to sit around 78 most frequently. I brought it down to where it usually is between 74 and 75 to make sure that the environment is a little bit better when I adopted the Dojo Loaches. It was one of those things where I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stressing them too much. Is it perfect? No, but it's within a good tolerance range to give them a good environment, but also at the same time give the other fish in this tank a good environment. There's Corridoras in there, there's some rainbows in there. They all like something a little bit different, but we can kind of find a sweet spot that gives them enough of everything they need for everyone to live, be happy, and have a good life. And that's one of the important things. If somebody tells you, no, you have to keep this fish at 82 degrees. It has to be pH 7. It has to be this. This face. Right? It's one of those things where you immediately need to be going kind of suspect. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I think you're telling me something that's not accurate. And it's important for us as hobbyists to go out when we hear that kind of information and look up things. Find other sources of truth, right? Make sure that we're not looking at only one dum-dum online and assuming that they are perfect and knowledgeable in everything, because we humans are very fallible. We make lots of mistakes. So if someone tells you, the only way to keep this fish is in a 40-gallon breeder with coarse sponge filters on air, and it has to be at exactly 77 degrees. Question that. And question that not necessarily by going into the comments of someone's video and be like, you're a dumb, where do you get off, right? Don't lose your mind in the comments, but more just go, okay, take a couple quick notes. They say this information. Now go look at somebody else who's done that, or go look at an online paper. There's tons of great online resources that tell you all sorts of information about pretty much any fish out there. Go look at those and compare. If somebody tells you that not liking Oscars means you're a dumbass. I'm looking at you, John. Well, they're wrong. Clearly, rainbows are better. But you know what I'm saying, right? If somebody tells you something in a very absolute fashion, that this is the only way, I agree with John 100%. But where I want to add to that conversation is the thought that if you get somebody, even the most knowledgeable people in our hobby, usually are very good about telling them, hey, this has been my experience. And the important part is somebody telling you that my experience says this is what finds the most success, and here's all the information around it. Then we need to, on our own, go out and compare. Well, is our water similar? If not, I might have to doctor my water a little bit. Or maybe I can find other sources of information out there that will tell me, hey, just because I have liquid rock well water and Bentley lives in the Northwest where it's pretty much rainwater right out of the tap, this fish will still be fine. Because maybe he forgot to mention, like, oh, you buffer the minerals up because there's rainwater out of the tap, so you're adding crushed coral to all those tanks. Or, hey, this particular fish that everybody says, does great in hard water, and you are in the Northwest, you have really soft water, or maybe you're in some other part that has like more glacier or river water where it's a little softer water. You might still have plenty of success with that fish. Don't be steered away from it immediately. The big thing that I want to focus in on, the secondary lesson to John's video that I think was really important, is you don't want to see people steered away from this wonderful hobby because they get advice like it's completely black and white and that there's no gray area. In any fish keeping, there is always a fairly wide margin, a gray area where there's lots of different experiences. And in the last example I want to give you guys, and I know most of mine are rainbowfish, but that's because that's my expertise. It's just like you wouldn't go to the rainbowfish guy to get advice on how to keep African cichlids, because I don't have the relevant experience to give you really good information. I could tell you a little bit about how I love them as a kid and my aunt used to keep them, but I couldn't tell you the details about how to be successful because I personally haven't done that. Other than it's like, well, you need kind of hard water, and certain ones can be kind of aggressive, so basically overstock your tank and feed them really well. That's not great advice, right? You don't want to take that as like, that's the exact way to keep African cichlids. Thanks, rainbowfish guy. So in that regard, right, this is one of those things where nothing is absolute in this hobby other than fish need water, fish need food. It's just one of the things that John said. Like, really, the only absolutes are that fish need water and food. There's lots of different ways to get oxygen into your water. You don't always have to have an air stone. You could have live plants producing oxygen for you. You could have very high water flow from a canister filter or a sump, and that ripple and churn at the top of the water is going to naturally cause gas exchange and bring oxygen down into your water. You could have X, Y, Z. There's so many different ways that we can have success in our aquariums. So if somebody tells you this is the only way, they're wrong. Plain and simple. There's just too many right solutions to any given problem. But we also need to make sure that we hobbyists, when we learn anything, we need to make sure that we're looking at it through the scope of, let's make sure we isolate the factors that are different between Bentley's tanks and my tanks at home, or Gary Lang's tanks and this guy's tanks, right? Whatever it may be, so that we understand that in each of our home locales, there's differences. And even people who live very close together. I live very close to Ryan of Hoon Aquatics. I live very close to Alex of Secret History. I even live relatively close in the grand scheme of things of the world to a number of different people from the aquarium co-op group. But for each of us, the water is a little different in our home tanks. So we have to make sure that we are paying attention to those small differences, because it's a learning process. I have another video where I've talked about how the number one thing to finding success in this hobby is understanding your water, right? And I still believe that. Other than The best lesson I can ever teach you, the best skill is patience. But the number one piece of information you can ever learn as far as having greater success at your own home is understanding your water, because things in your water will influence how you do things with live plants, how you do things with certain fish, etc., etc., etc. There's tons of stuff. So let's make sure that we're being good stewards of information when we're receiving it, and not assuming that that person's tanks, the water that's going into them, is exactly the same as the water that's going into our tanks. Make sure that we're doing both sides of this. And if somebody tells you there's only one way to do this, you could only use one filtration method, you could only use one food, the only way ever to raise this kind of fish is only by this specific live food, let's make sure that we're questioning that and looking at other options, or maybe trying stuff for ourselves. That's it, guys. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that these talking head ones can be a little different and quite as fun if you don't see pretty fish, but I tried to splice a few things in. If you did enjoy this video, please comment down below. Let me know, is there something that you've learned the hard way, or maybe you've encountered a video where somebody told you, oh, the only way that I've had success is this way. Maybe it was me, but you've had success in a different way. I want to know those things. Where did you find your success that was different from a source of information on the internet? I want to hear your stories and what you guys have had success with. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.